Karam, for having me. Hi, I'd like to introduce myself. I'm Bob Hermes, and I run the Prisma Access NOC for Palo Alto Networks. And I'm delighted to be here and share what I know about monitoring Prisma Access with you all so that you can all play along at home. So I have some best practices that I put together for monitoring Prisma Access tenants. You really want to look at the alert telemetry so that you can get notification when things go wrong, you can respond to them, and you can remediate them in a timely manner. And that's what operations is all about. And if you work in a NOC or you manage a NOC, that's your job, is to get alerts and deal with them. There's two types of alerts that we're going to talk about today. There's infrastructure alerts, and they come from Prisma Access Insights, and they'll tell you about the infrastructure operations and alerts and failures that are going on with your Prisma Access tenant. And then things going on inside your tenant are operational alerts, and you're going to get that information out of your Cortex data lake, and you can log forward out of there. And we'll go into the great details of what kind of things you can find in each of these sources of alerts. And if at any time you have any questions about alerting or anything, drop it in the Q&A, and we'll address it after my session. The alert notifications for the infrastructure alerts. They come from Prisma Access Insights, and they can be forwarded via email or pushed via a webhook or retrieved via an API. If you have a small tenant, you can manage your alert load via email. If you have a large tenant, and especially if you have multiple tenants or you're in a multi-tenant environment, you definitely want to automate your alerting because you're just going to get sandbagged with emails. So I currently have a alert load of several thousand a day. So you don't want to get several thousand emails a day. So the webhook is, we'll spend some time on the webhook. The APIs are documented. There's an API version 1 and 2. API 1.0 is good for single tenant environments. If you're managing multiple tenants or you've divided up your Prisma Access tenant into multiple subtenants, you'll want to take a look at the API 2.0 for dealing with multi-tenancy. What kind of alerts can you get from Prisma Access Insights? If you haven't been to Prisma Access Insights, I'd highly recommend it. It's a great dashboard. It contains all of your alert history. It contains telemetry graphs of alerts back for the past 30 days of and performance graphs, so you can watch your bandwidth over time. You can watch what has happened on your tenant over time, so you can see recurring things. And that's very important when you're looking at things that happen like during the weekdays versus during the weekends. And they might be load related issues. So the types of alerts that you're going to get fall into a couple of categories. The first one is the gateway scheduled autoscale failure. So if your gateways are scheduled to autoscale, which would be to grow more gateways during busy hours during the week, and it fails, there's really only two reasons for the autoscale failures. That's you've either exhausted your IP address pool, which you're going to get an IP address pool alert along with that or prior to that, or you had a commit that failed, and you can see that in your logs as well. If your commit failed, then auto scaling is not can be impacted by that. IP pool usage and capacity, it depends on how much of your IP address pool has been used or exhausted. Once your IP address pool is exhausted, that can affect future auto scaling. So don't make sure that you have enough IP address pool, and you can see your IP address pool utilization in your Insights dashboard at any time. So please make sure you do visit that dashboard. It's a handy place to go look for things. You'd like to automate your alert process coming into your systems so that if you have your own internal ticketing system for managing all of your other assets, you can manage your Prisma access like you manage all the other things that you might be watching in your environment. The infrastructure notifications, those are just informational things like we're going to upgrade you in 2 weeks and things you want to keep track of. I think licensing expiration is also an infrastructure notification. And the rest of these all fall into tunnel down events. So they're all just different flavors of a tunnel going down. There's ECMP, there's tunnel downs, which would be IPsec tunnel downs, and those are spread out across remote networks or service connections. There's also tunnel flaps, that if the tunnel goes down 5 times within 10 minutes, we'll consider that a flapping condition and give you a different type of alert to let you know that the tunnel is unstable and also would require attention. Site downs, you have a remote network site down and a service connection site down. Those alerts are to tell you that all the tunnels connected to that Prisma access node have gone down. Now, if you only have one tunnel going into, we'll call it a region when you define where your tunnels are going to be placed. If you only have one tunnel going into that region and that tunnel goes down, you'll get a tunnel down and a site down. So, and just be aware, site down might just mean a single tunnel is down. It means all the tunnels are down, but it depends how many tunnels you have as to how critical that is. All these alerts and the definitions are linked into this link. We'll put them in the video when we post this so that you can have access to all these links, or you can just Google it. Palo Alto Networks is very good at making their documentation easily Googleable, searchable. To forward your alerts out of Insights, you need to go into your Insights dashboard. And then in the alerts section, you can see all the history of your alerts too, which is pretty handy because you'll see alerts that have cleared in the past for conditions that might be chronic or recurring. But your notification profiles is where you're going to specify what alerts you want to send and where you want to send them. And you can have multiple notification profiles defined simultaneously. So if you are of a tenant of any appreciable size, you will probably want to ingest, and you're not doing all of your network management manually via emails. You will want to ingest your alert feed via a webhook. So you can do it via email or a webhook in the Insights notification profile. If you want to use the API, that's separate, and you can follow the API documentation for pulling your alerts. But the webhooks, you can have it with no authentication, basic authentication, which would be username and password, or you can use tokens to make sure that you have security for all of the alerts that are being sent into your system. And then down here, there's several checkboxes for the service connection, mobile users, informational and remote network categories of alerts that we talked above. There are OKIO alerts, but those will be going away at the end of the year. So unless you have any OKIO equipment, you probably won't be configuring OKIO alerts. The alert structure, I want to talk about a little bit. Every alert has a unique UUID, and we'll show you how to do that in the next, how to use that in the next slide. There's the title, severity, all of the alerts are stateful. The reason that it was cleared, the alert codes, the categories, what objects are impacted and related objects. But the meat of what I really wanted to tell you today is how tips and tricks on alert processing. So all of the alerts are stateful, like I said, and it's stateful tied to the alert ID. So this is an example of a webhook JSON message for an alert. So every alert, every unique alert condition has an alert ID. So the first message that you're going to get with a unique alert ID would be a raised state. So in this example, we have a remote network BGP down. So that's the alert that we've gotten. It's going to have this unique alert ID and it's raised. So raised would be the first notification that we got on it. BGP downs don't get updated. They either are raised or cleared. So at some point in the future, when whatever caused this condition happened goes away or gets fixed and BGP comes back up, you'll get another message with the same alert ID, same alert code, primary WAN BGP down or up. I think it's up. And then you'll have the state raised. So when you're doing your correlation of alerts, you should be tracking state at home. If you're ingesting this feed into your ticketing system, you can auto close your tickets based on a state cleared for, and if you're creating tickets for raised states, you can clear your tickets or close your tickets when you get a cleared event. And it would take something off of the plate of your analysts having to look at if you auto close your events whenever a condition goes away, because they don't have to pay attention to things immediately that are no longer a problem. It could have some historical significance if it's a chronic or it comes back repeatedly, but generally you want to track state of any failure that has happened in your network. And you would do that with the alert ID in red and the state in brown. The other place that you can correlate or have a great opportunity to correlate. So you're going to receive a lot of alerts if you have a large tenant. And the job of your NOC or your operations team is to whittle those down into the smallest number of things for your people to pay attention to and to work on. So all of the tunnel, BGP, ECMP down alerts and tunnel and BGP and ECM flap alerts, they all could be related to the same issue. So if you get multiple of these conditions simultaneously with the same tunnel name, then you should bundle them up into the same event to have your people work on it. So personally, we're using XOR, which is a Palo Alto product for processing alerts in my NOC. And we're correlating based on tunnel names so that we just have all these alert events for BGP, ECMP, tunnel downs, all combined up into the same ticket for my analysts to look at. So I recommend you do the same. It's going to reduce the number of tickets that your people are going to have to look at and address and research. So tunnel name is very important. Now, tunnel name is also pretty useful if you're in a multi-tenancy environment. So multi-tenancy would be if you have to manage more than one Prisma Access tenant, and there's slightly different versions of multi-tenancy. So the traditional multi-tenancy is if you bought a large Prisma Access network, you can subdivide that license space into multiple tenants that have multiple tenancy. A lot of customers do that to have overlapping IP address space on different, segregate them into different tenants because it gets confusing with routing. If you try to put every overlapping address space in the same tenant, you have to do a lot of matting, and that's ugly. So to solve the overlapping address space and for a bunch of other motivations, you can create subtenants with a single tenant. And the subtenants get treated separately. You can separate alerts based on subtenant by either using the subtenant ID or the subtenant name. So we use a subtenant name that usually will have your company name in there, or some variant of your company name with the unique numeric tenant ID. Your tenant ID would be your parent tenant ID. If you only have one tenant, this will be your tenant ID. The other type of multi-tenancy is if you are a managed service provider or MSSP, and you have multiple customers and they each have their own tenant IDs. You can sort the alerts based on the main tenant ID, or there's another trick is you can create tunnel names. Tunnel names are entirely up to you. You're free to name your tunnels anything up to, I think it's 63 characters long, but I'm not sure. Please check before you come up with a naming architecture for your tunnel names. But you can do things like take the tunnel name and put a company name in front of it, and then a tunnel identifier. So in this example, I used Wayland-Yutani as a sub-company that's using this this tenant, and this stands just for tunnel 92. So it's another way that you can use the information that's available and that's under your control, which is tunnel names. You pick your own tunnel names when you're building the tunnels in your Panorama or in your cloud-based manager. And the tunnel names are exposed in the alerts. They're not only exposed in the insights alerts, like we see here, they're also exposed in the CDL logs. So they're pretty universal. So tunnel names are a powerful mechanism for sorting your alerts that you're receiving in at your NOC. All right, all that was a tenant level infrastructure alerts. Now we're going to get to the operational alerts. So things that are going on inside your tenant. You would want to have Cortex Data Lake forward logs. So Cortex Data Lake, just a quick review for everybody. Cortex Data Lake is a large log repository that you purchase with Prisma Access. All the logs from your Prisma Access infrastructure flow into the Cortex Data Lake. And you can use your app on the hub to look at those logs. You can look at those logs if you have a standalone Panorama. Those logs can be pulled into the Panorama for examination, but you can't forward them out of your Panorama. If you want to forward your logs, your Prisma Access logs, whether they're traffic logs or system logs or any logs that your Prisma Access infrastructure generates, you have to use log forwarding. And you can forward your logs either via syslog, secure syslog, not plain text, or HTTPS, which is also secure. There's a couple of links for that that you can Google them, or you can find them here. But there's useful stuff, and you can specify your log format, whether you want it comma delimited, tab delimited, or space delimited, and they're all using RFC 5425 log formats, which is standard syslog. The secure syslog does require some certificates to be set up. You can use public certificates, but you can also import private certs to work with Cortex Data Lake, so that all of your log traffic is encrypted because it's passing over the open internet, and you don't want just anybody looking at your logs. Logs can contain very sensitive information. The kinds of things that you can expose in log forwarding, basically anything you can find in a log, which also includes like IPsec tunnel ups and downs, BGP ups and downs, but deeper things, like if you're using EDLs. EDL is a Palo Alto feature available in the firewalls and Prisma Access for external data list. So it allows you to stand up a web server someplace, has a list of IP addresses or FQDNs on that web server, and then Prisma Access or your firewall, because this feature is available for both, can pull that list in periodically, as short an interval as every 5 minutes. They can pull that list in and add that to any of your policies. So you can use those. You can use a list of IP addresses or FQDNs that exist out on a trusted website on the open internet, and you can use that to modify your policies. That's very handy if you're a service provider and you have customers that want to manage their own policy, but there's certainly some issues about customers managing their own policy in a managed service. EDL is a very handy mechanism for giving less trusted third parties tangential access to their policies. So you can expose, you can give them control of a web server for allow lists or deny lists or anything that you can create a policy. You can use EDL as an object. But because EDL is really handy, you want to know whether and when the EDL server is unreachable. So there's an alert for that. And that alert you can find in the Cortex Data Lake by creating a filter in your log forwarding profile that looks for a system log with a severity of medium and an event name value of general. And that's actually the only event that fits this filter. License expirations also show up in your logs. Authentication server unreachable, that's a big one. You don't want your authentication servers to be unreachable, and you want to know about that as soon as possible. So that's a critical authentication log that is inside the system logs. So you can track authentication failures. You're going to see a lot of action on this because every wrong password, every credential stuffing attack, everybody who's just trying random passwords on your open infrastructure is going to generate this log. But you might be interested in seeing what the trend is over time. And that could provide interesting information for you. If you're doing any SOC work, security operations center work, you definitely want to be ingesting your threat logs and your Wildfire logs. So threat logs would be all of your antivirus, your IPS events, and your Wildfire logs are all the great content that Wildfire tells you about threatening traffic that's traversing your systems. The reason why you want to set up a CDL filter on these logs is because then only these particular events are going to be sent in. If you do a forward all, you're going to get a fire hose of traffic, and then you're going to have to filter through all of that on your own side. Many customers do want to keep a copy of all their traffic logs, and that's by volume, that's the highest amount of logs that you have. But for managing your Prisma access, you really want to look at the system and the threat, the firewall threat logs, because those are the ones that will affect operations more than just your traffic logs. Of course, people need to look at traffic logs for all the troubleshooting purposes of the day-to-day stuff. But when things fail, these are the logs that you want to be looking at. All right, I think I rocketed right through that.